I'm starting to think this saying now is really, really significant. I don't think you can take it to, you can't ignore this whole Robin Hood thing. The fact that we know that it's meant to be Nottingham, but our area, that's quite. There's a lot going on in our area to do with that whole thing. The fact that the whole end of Robin Hood's life, and he's it's a big part of the story. After all the main adventures, he comes here and then he's not well, and then he shoots his arrow, and then where the arrow lands is gonna be buried, like a burial. So it's got burial, right? Now, it's meant to be a legend and myth. We don't exactly know exactly who it was and exactly what happened. I mean, it says Earl of Huntingdon, and then they've got saying it's this, there are different identities for it. We've got this story. Now, one fact is, when was it meant to be? Right? Because on that grave it says Earl of Huntingdon, but we've got various other contradictory stories that it might have been someone else. But why is it meant to be in that area, and why at that nunnery or whatever, wherever it was? Well, it's meant to be in the 1100s, 1200s, is written on that grave. Now that is so close to. I mean, when you think of the Robin Hood tales, you think of this like merry medieval England, like when you watch the cartoon and it's all knights and jousting and all that. But the Anglo-Saxon period with King Arthur is kind of sort of like meant to be knights, but a little bit earlier, a different culture. But there's meant to be kind of knights and chivalry then. But this Norman, you don't really think of William the Conqueror, and you don't really think of, the Norman Battle of Hastings when you think of Robin Hood. But it's only a couple of 100 years after, so it's still within range. Now, the thing is, when you get a story like that, elements of it usually are stories. Bards tell stories to remember things. It's to try and get you to remember something, even a term or a word or something, to try and preserve some sort of memory in it so it's not lost. And it's all about extracting it out of what it is. And it can be compressed. Like on a computer, right? When you have a computer file and, you're running out of space on your hard drive, and then you can compress it. It shrinks the file into less data, and you've got to have the right program to undo it. Well, all you've got to do with the human mind, with these stories and clues they put in them, is establish which ones are true and which ones aren't, and then extract it. Well, how would you know how to do that if you're just a human being and you're not a computer? Well, we're actually more clever than a computer. Humans are mathematically clever, but when it comes to context and meaning and symbols, when it comes to creativity and identifying patterns and things, we're actually better at computers because we're human. So what you do is, and this is a skill that you can have, and I don't think that you can necessarily just be taught it, because some people might not have the capacity for it. And I know it's a bit kind of tight saying that, but I believe it. And all you have to do is get the story right, and you have to check out through it it doesn't matter what order the events happen, and it doesn't matter it doesn't matter where it happened. If we can establish some of them are actually valid and important facts, and others aren't as important, right? And all you have to do is Look at any of the places where the story was meant to happen or somewhere near it. Look at the figures and what they symbolise and mean. What might they represent? I mean, you're getting into Joseph Campbell sort of stuff now. This is like a professor in mythology, you know. This is, when you're an archaeologist, right, all you know is how to dig stuff in the floor, find it, find out where it come from, do a chemical assessment on it, find out where the similar things were from, you know, you're doing archaeology with symbols. A mythology professor is mining symbols. He's mining, he's quarrying symbols and matching them up to things in the lands. What's there? So that's when your skills and your intellect, intelligence, telling yourself inside, right? Your mind's telling you, your capacity is telling you, you know. So we've got Robin Hood and a bow, right? And he wears this hat. Well known for that. We don't know when it got introduced, but we've got it anyway, you know. Did they wear those around that era? Well, apparently they did, you know. Apparently that was a fashion, unless they're making it up. You know, where did they get that from? They must have those hats from that era, unless somebody's lied, right? Well, we're getting something. There are so many things that fit once you start. You know, when you're getting, look, right, the simplified version of this is this, right? If you want the simplified version of this procedure, right, it's a child's game, and that is you get the box with the shapes cut out in it, and then you get the shapes, and you see which shapes fit through the box, right? There's a star shape goes through there, then a triangle goes in the top, and then the square goes from that side, and there's a circle one, and there you go. You've put the shapes in the box. That's it, right? And if you're a professor of a professor of a professor of a masters, whatever, OBE in whatever you want to stick on your wall, right? And get the vocabulary out. Let's get the vocabulary out. You know, we'll get the vocabulary out if you want to get the vocabulary out, right? We'll throw some words around, you know, dissertations and you know, whatever you want, right? I don't have my vocabulary at the moment because I've not been well. Used to. Got a dictionary at the side of my bed here, right? So you don't need the words, because all words do at the end of the day is words are ways of describing something in more detail. That doesn't mean to say that you don't know something in great detail in your mind and you don't understand it in great detail, right? All that means is that if you don't have the words available to pass it through the air to someone else, right? This is a thing with academics. The academics think that because you can describe something in a very, 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 very rich detail, then you are more intelligent. You must be able to therefore understand something in great more detail and know something in great detail. But that's not necessarily true. If you are an artist, right, and you draw on paper an amazing landscape scene with a pencil, all shadowed and highlighted in great detail, so the illustration is an absolute, it's near photograph quality, and you've put every single little mark on that paper, right, and filled in every little bit of detail, so that when you show someone that bit of paper, they go, wow, you know, it looks like a photograph. There's that much perfected detail in it, right? That is, right, the equivalent of an academic's use of the vocabulary, right, to describe something, but not on paper visually with words, right? Like Russell Brand's very good with words, right? But that does not mean to say that. That's putting it down on paper. Are you telling me that I cannot look out of the window and, wow, I can see before me the scene exactly as that guy's illustration? But I don't need to be able to pick my hand up and draw it in great detail in paper to see it with my eyes Like, I open my eyes, I see it, then I close my eyes, and I can imagine it in my mind, right? I'm not very good at knowing where to put the marks on the paper in order to show you what I saw. But that's what I saw, right? Putting it down on the paper in the right place at the right distance apart with the right light and shadow and all that, that doesn't mean to say I didn't look at it and I didn't see it. But then you might go in to say, well, people can see things, but they didn't notice all that about it. Well, put it this way, there are different aspects to it. We're talking about the visual aspects now. I've seen the visual aspects, right? I know what they look like and I remember them. I might not be able to draw it on paper. Now, I can try describing to it in words. Oh, there was some fields with some trees, forest more to the left, and then some meadows, and then 5 cows. And then the more and more details I add, the more and more I can, I'm painting the picture, right? Now, with language and words, you get sometimes it's not necessary to go into that much detail, because if you're stood with someone in the street and you say, where you been? And you say, I went down to the shop and I saw Vera Duckworth and then I bought some milk, you don't have to tell them, I don't have to describe, the brand of the milk and, whether the texture of the milk bottle. And I don't have to describe, how, her hair was done, and I don't have to just I don't have to say what the what type of wood the counter was made out of, because that's too much information for the context of that conversation, right? So there might be some things that I didn't notice in there that she was a bit upset. I might not notice that, or I might not have noticed that she her shoes were on the wrong feet, or at the end of the day, right? You can fill as much detail as you want till kingdom come, and there might be things that you didn't notice and things that you did notice, right? That's professors. I mean, they can ramble and rave all day and all night, but they might be giving you context and detail about something, but completely miss something else, which was apparent to someone who looked at it. Do you know what I mean? And now I'm talking about it, and I just want to talk about this. But it's kind of justifying intellectual capacity. Some people cannot recognise your intellectual capacity because they might recognise intellectual capacity through a different thing. They might recognise someone's intelligent because they've got extensive vocabulary and they're good at, filling details in your words. But, another person might have an intellectual capacity by simply, the professor might have described the entire room in the, most elaborate detail, right? But he might have described the entire sheen, texture, dimensions of every wardrobe in the room, to the greatest capacity, to the exact millimetre in his conversation, and everything. He recalled every single word that everyone said, but he might not have noticed that she had her shoes on the wrong feet, or that her cardigan was inside out. There might be something that he overlooked, right? Now, when it comes to this and the Robin Hood thing, for example, putting the shapes in the box, all you are doing is saying, oh, that shape fits there, I recognised it, and it's there. I've got the shape in my hand, right? We're going to see if these shapes fit in the box, right? Now, have I got the shape? Right, here we've got triangle shape, right? So let's look at the box. Is there a triangle shape on it? Well, there is. Yes. Correct. Now, next one. So when we're doing these myths, right, we've got a myth that says something about Robin Hood and something about being buried or a burial, right? And it's just happens to be a stone's throw away from Huddersfield. And for crazy, it's called Huddersfield and it's Robin Hood. That's one thing that fits. But in old maps, it's called Hathersfield. Little John ended up in Hathersage. Now, we've got this bow, fires a bow, and Robin Hood's known for a bow. Now, is there anything in the Huddersfield area to do with anything, around that era? We're talking, like back in time, sometime, around Robin Hood, that could have been a major significant event enough to bring the bow symbol up. Well, that just happens to be, a guy who invaded from, France, massive battle took place. Well, it was 100 or 200 years before that. But and then De Lacy ends up building a massive fortress. Happens to be at Huddersfield, and it happens to be the front of it happens to be shaped like a big ship with a bow in the front of it. Oh, that's a bow, and then the bow happens to be pointing straight towards where Robin Hood's grave is. And actually, if it had been pointing where the hill was originally orientated to, he's pointing straight at a big mound that was called the Warrior's Burial Tomb. Now, if that ain't fitting things, it's starting to get a few things that fit, and there's something, don't say, you're just pulling these things out of the air. I'm not pulling them out of the air. I'm pulling them out of the story. Let's uncompress the story. Someone's compressed the story. Right, we're gonna get the file. We're gonna see if anything in it fits, is valid, right? And if nothing at all fits, there's nothing there. If some things start to fit, then you start going, right? And then more things fit, you start going, right? Have I got the shape there it fits in? Have I got the thing? Robin Hood's got a bow. Where does it fit? Oh, yeah, well, there's a bow there on the front of Castle Hill. What a coincidence, right? And then, we've got a burial mound. Well, there's something to do with him being buried, and then the name of the town, Huddersfield. Well, it's Robin Hood. Fuck me, there's 3 things that fit in the box. Do you know what I mean? This is it. So, there's some, like, only the foolish, only the most foolish of the fools would say, there's nothing there. You still have heard some elaborate theories, but this is ridiculous. I mean, this is when you slap them and say, wake up, man. You don't have 3 fitting symbols perfectly between the place and the story, right, that are that, significant if it's not something to it, So, and then you've got his hat. Well, Robin Hood's hat. Well, does it fit anything? Yeah, well, it's the shape of Castle Hill, a long barrow. Well, twiddle-middy. There's another thing that fits. Now, what are the chances of that? We've nearly filled all the, there's only 6 sides on a cube, so if you can get 6 things that fit, you're doing well, because it's not that much of a complicated puzzle, So, and then he robs from the rich and gives to the poor. Well, and rob. Well, in old Celtic, in old, north of England Celtic, we've got this and rob. Well, they call him Robin Hood. Now, this Celtic saying is why I started this whole conversation. And rob. It means, were you? So, and rob, toik, how you spell it, is, were you happy? But it's asking you a question. It's saying, back then, it's saying, it's questioning, it's saying your happiness, right? It's saying, did you have happiness? It's saying, did you have happiness at that time? Were you happy? So were you happy? Were you is referring to a play. It's not saying now. It's not saying, I'm not saying, are you happy now? Because were you happy is in the past tense, okay? So what he's saying is, in the past tense, questioning your happiness. So in a time that's past, in a time which is not now when I'm speaking to you, but in a time that was then, a time we've passed from, in the time we've passed from previously, I'm, wondering whether you were happy, right? So this and rob is to do with, it's like the past tense, and it's questioning in the past tense what the question basically. A good way to say it actually is the question mark. So it's effectively, in Celtic, it means, because language they've got different referrers in different languages. So effectively, I think this is a good way to put it. It effectively means it's putting a question mark over a past time. So an or robh means it basically, we insert the question mark in a past tense to something, right? So there's a question mark in the past tense to something. So you're questioning something of the past tense, or was there something in the past tense? So that's significant now, because if you think of Huddersfield, we've got a lot of question marks, haven't we? We've got the word, the town's name, Huddersfield. Hood, now, when you say hood, you think of a hood that you put over your head, right? But it was spelled Huddersfield on some old maps. So we've got a good question mark over that, haven't we, So we could say, and robh, Huddersfield. Was it Huddersfield or was it Huddersfield? That's one thing we can raise. And then we could go, Robin Hood, and robh, Robin Hood in Mirfield, was Robin Hood even in Mirfield? Who was and robh Robin Hood? Was there a Robin Hood? Now the most curious thing is when we get to the warrior's tomb. What's that all about? And robh warrior's tomb is, was there a warrior's tomb? Well, we don't need to ask, was there a warrior's tomb? Because there is. Or, and robh something, is there something there? Well, there bloody well is something there. There's a massive, huge, a massive mound that's the shape of a little bit cat mushroom, or a helmet, whatever you want to call it, or even a heart. Could be the heart of England, for the position it is right in the middle of the country. I mean, never mind Kevin Costner going, what does he say, Kevin Costner in Robin Hood, in that particular version of the film, is like, cut your heart out with a spoon, You see, the guy who wrote that movie, the producer or writers of that movie, he said he could cut his heart out with a spoon. You see, in the old Robin Hood programmes, they had that guy with the heart head, Heart's Head. You've got Heart's Head, haven't you? There's a place, Heart's Head. In fact, Heart's Head is on the Armitage estate, which essentially Heart's Head is more or less where Robin Hood's grave is. Now, the thing about a Heart's Head is you refer to the animal with the antlers, and that was in the Robin Hood television series, the old pagan guy that he went to see in the forest. But the Heart's Head, thing with a heart is it's a heart and a head. Heart's Head is it's your heart and it's your head. Now, the funny thing about that mound is it's shaped like a heart, like the actual real shape of the heart, not the pretend heart, like the pretend love heart of the heart, like the cartoon love heart. The real, the real gory, medical heart is kind of a bit more sort of roundish triangle shaped, Well, that is the shape of that mound. It is a heart shape, but it's also the shape of the helmet, which is the conical shape of the Liberty as well. So it fits Heart's Head, and it fits hearts, it fits your heart, and it fits your head. And that's Heart's Head. That's where Robin Hood's grave is, And the person who wrote the Robin Hood film throws a joke line into there, saying you're going to cut your heart with a spoon. Now, what you're going to do with a spoon is you've got a bit of metal, it's like a mini shovel, and you've got to do a lot of digging, into a cadaver, A cadaver happens to be the word for a body. I've pulled that out of the dictionary because I knew that. It's a computer game of it called cadaver. In fact, my mate used to like that computer game, cadaver, and he ended up being making videos of hospital. He ended up being someone who edits hospital operation videos. So that's a job to end up getting into when you're a fan of a computer game when you're little, called cadaver. So yeah, in that film, he's going like, in the Robin Hood film, the writers wrote it in that, you're going to cut her out with a spoon. Now, the thing that I'm wondering about that mound is, was it an actual hill fort shape rather than just a mound? Or has it always been a mound that is big enough to be a hill fort but doesn't have a wavy fortification, like Maiden Castle or Old Oswestry? It could have had, and it could have been dug out. And if so, and into a heart shape, it could have, essentially, they could have cut it out with a spoon like we cut your, we'll cut your hill fort up with shovels. We could dig it out. There's something in that. And I think the film producer, director, writer knew that as well. So, but that, could it have been the Romans that did it? Or could it have been De Lacy who did it, Or wasn't it? Was it always just really steep and smooth anyway? We don't know. But what you find interesting about that question is it raises the question mark over it. So, and robh, Warrior's Tomb, fortified. So you're saying, was what the Warrior's Tomb fortified? Or, well, is it fortified? Well, was it fortified? You could say easy. You could say with slopes that steep, and it couldn't not be fortified. But what was it? More? Was it more than? Was it big? Was it bigger? Did it have more fortifications? Or was it more the size of Oswestry and more the shape of Oswestry? And did the Romans dig it out? Or did De Lacy dig it out when he did Castle Hill? Or was De Lacy, when he dug out the fortifications of Castle Hill, did he suspect the same thing? And did he dig out that as a symbol? And how was he end up digging it out with a bow shape, the bow of a ship? And then we end up with the Robin Hood story a couple of 100 years later or so. There's some connection with De Lacy in real life if Varley, the archaeologist, hasn't led us up the wrong path and lied about the dates on when it was fortified. We've got, you see, are these archaeologists telling the truth or not? And that is a question where we always believe them. Because they're reputable archaeologists, and they've got no reason to want to mislead us, supposedly. But I always question whether they're right or wrong, what their motives are. This is the thing. I'm not always convinced by these people. Did Varley just dig a well in the middle of Castle Hill because he wanted to really have an excuse to dig down it and see if there's oak food inside it? When there were already some wells around it, and you wouldn't need one in the top, and where are the other wells on the other hill forts, and it's not that far from a river, really. So, although that's running water, well, they can still boil it, I suppose. And this saying, and robh, it's like Robin. Now, the thing is, he's called Robin Hood, right? So, what is the hood? Well, the hood is meant to be something that you put over your head, right? It's meant to be like, part of a cloak, which happens to be not unlike a helmet that you put on your head or a conical shape of something. The hood is conical shaped. We've got the river Cone, that's where the cone comes from, like in the Welsh connaught, which is a cone, and the naught, like you have the naught is a zero, connaught, cone, and a naught. Well, a cone is a naught with an elongation out of it, which Bridget is elongation, isn't it? Bridget is a projection, a mast, and elongation out of something. So, it's almost like the wizard's hat, you can flatten it or pull it up, but the Robin Hood hat's not actually meant to be that shape. It's kind of like more of a long barrow shape, which actually is the shape of Castle Hill. So, and robh, was there, you could say, was there a hood? So, it could be a riddle, like Robin Hood is, was there a hood? Was there Huddersfield? Was there a hood? But what is the hood? You know? Well, it meant not even meant to be in Huddersfield. It meant to be Huddersfield. So, that's one thing that was robbed, the name Huddersfield. Now, what about this burial thing? Well, it's not something to be ignored that when we get a extremely well-known or, famous tale of a, medieval legend of someone dying and they fire an arrow and where they're going to die is where they're going to be buried, from a bow, and they're called Robin Hood, and we're all wondering whether they even existed or not and whether even the tale's true. Was there really a story? Did these events happen? And Robin Hood? Why is it that in the period, if we're going to section history off into sections, Robin Hood era, what's just before the Robin Hood era in history? Oh, well, it's De Lacy. Well, tickle me pink. What's happening with Lacy? Well, there's some, bow action going on at the front of that ship that he just carved out of the hill fort, and it's pointing straight at a massive burial mound, So, it almost... Were they, at that point, when the legend was conceived, already trying to put into a bard's tale or tell us something that they did know or some information that they did have from the time before that had been in stories? Now, what's the time before that? Well, when you skip back one more page, on one page in the history books you've got Robin Hood. If you're going back any further significantly, you're going straight to William the Conqueror, because there's not that much in between Robin Hood and William the Conqueror for anything worth mentioning. Now, if you're turning back one more page from William the Conqueror, then we're straight back into Arthurian, 500, 600, maybe even 800, like Book of Kells, whatever, If it's legitimate, I'm not questioning whether Book of Kells is legitimate. I question whether anything's legitimate. I always, doubt everything until it's absolutely proved. Well, you could say that I'm like these people who, don't believe what I'm saying now. But what I'm saying is, this is what I think. They're telling me what they think, what the professor thinks, and he's saying, well, I'm questioning the professor, but I'm only questioning the professor as much as he's questioning me. He don't think that my vision and my way of assimilating the evidence from these stories and sagas, my decompressing it and my fitting the shapes into it, he doesn't think this is a legitimate field of professional study because you can't get a degree in it yet. Look at Joseph Campbell, and I say to him, well, I don't believe your stupid chemical tests and your stupid bioassays and whatever, because somebody could have planted it in, 3 months on Tuesday and might have been a professional planter, so professional that he can fool a professor, might have rubbed a swab on it or something from some of these, dogs. I know people who are telling me now that they know people who are working in the police force who are actually armed officers, and they when they did their COVID test, they rubbed it on the dog and sent it in, and it came up as positive. So, this is what's happening. You can't trust tests because people aren't necessarily going about the procedure properly. Now, so, what have we got on the next page, sorry, when we look at in the Arthurian period? Well, before we even get back to 500 or 600, which is, we've got some names for people in the Anglo-Saxon times in our area, particularly people with Welsh names and some Celtic names in this area, obviously when the Romans pulled out. But actually, in the next step back, really, from De Lacy and William the Conqueror from 1066, I'd say a good page turn back, it is around 800. So what have you got around 800 is you've got those Irish ram towers popping up, one or two in Scotland. I don't know if there are any in Wales and in Ireland, particularly on the east coast. They're an elongation. Those long towers are a bridged, a mast, a tower, a beam, pole, a projection going up. And our area is Brig House. Ag Brig. So what are they doing popping up over in Ireland? Well, I think the priesthood travelled around a lot. I definitely know that the Druids travelled around a lot. Cause there's no doubt about it, or they wouldn't have studied stargazing and astronomy, because you've got to travel to put into practice orienteering. You've got to do a lot of travelling. The thing that has got some evidence on it. So from, you see on that William the Conqueror tapestry, there's loads of bows, isn't it? It's all laid out on that tapestry, all bows and arrows and fighting. But that's down at Hastings, right, on the south coast. That's not directly to do with West Yorkshire. If you go back to Ireland, Book of Kells, right, that's in Ireland. That's not in West Yorkshire either. But I'm gonna say, is there anything on there? It's a period of something we've got. That book is quite significant. Can that book, has it got anything to refer to do with anything more than one thing, right, that could suggest anything of Robin Hood? Well, it's got, when you look at that character on that illumination, he if you look at it the right way around, he is got his arms reached out, and it's like he's holding a bow, right? If it's, if it really is legitimate and really was drawn in that time, he does like he's holding a bow, right? And just like going to fire it, and it kind of looks like he's wearing a helmet as well, So helmet, and it also looks like he's putting his arms over a long barrow, and he's giving arms. There's a lot in that, and to study that illumination, you can't just be a professor of, you can't just have studied doing on-site digs all your life, because you need to have, you need to get into some heavy sacrament stuff, which is what they're studying at Royal Imperial College, but they're not talking about it or telling you about it in context. Well, I'll tell you one thing they're not doing at the Royal Imperial College in London. They're not giving them the Book of Kells to sit and read while they've dosed them up with whatever it is, Terence McKenna dosage of psilocybin. I'll tell you that, because if you took them around some ancient heritage sites and then give them that book to stare at, for 6 hours in a room, that'd be some, then you could get. And the fact that it's called, the guy who's doing the experiments is called Carhart as well. I've just remembered. The guy in the Imperial College in London, it's called, I forgot his other name, but it's called Carhart. I just said I was talking earlier about that man being shaped like a heart with the Robin Hood story, in the Robin Hood film, he's got to cut your heart with a spoon, I kind of think that's quite funny. I don't know what experiments they're doing or what experiments they claim they're doing, what questionnaires they're giving people, or what he really is studying for the Imperial College and the people who are listening in, and getting the research papers written down with the vocabulary, with the real meaning behind it and the real findings for the academics to bioassay up where they want to stick it. But to interpret that illumination, you need to have done some serious time and studying with the hands-on stuff, with the stuff, like some serious Terence McKenna, Dennis McKenna, Graham Hancock, Jonathan Ott territory stuff, And then it makes sense. And then to the, if Dennis McKenna is a doctor with a doctorate, so his evidence is therefore, it's submissible and taken seriously. Where you can say, well, we've got an illumination, we've got some bows on there, we've got some, we've got helmets, and he's even, firing over a long distance. So that era, that period, has got some things on that illumination that do fit into it. Now, you say there's a lot of bows, There was bows on they're using bows, and they're using helmets. Well, that's true, but, it fits, and it's significant with the long barrow, and with Castle Hill being a long barrow shape as well, right? I kind of think that it's significant. So I think it could be that there were already some things prior to when Robin Hood events happened, what contributed towards it, previous to that. And I actually think that our area with the helmet, it's unusual because the thing is, we've got Agbrig at Brig, which is at the bridge. And I think that you could refer to those long barrows as like bridge houses, really. It's kind of like an elongation, but a dwelling or chamber. But where did the helmet term come from, or why? Well, the thing is, the Celtic helmet is conical shape, and it is actually similar shape to that actual mound anyway. But the helmets became stood out when the Romans come over, because the Romans came over and brought that unique helmet shape, which had the elongation on the top, the curved elongation, which would to the Celts have appeared like they were all having rainbows symbolically over their heads, and almost like their skull was under a burial mound shape, and almost as if these soldiers can see the light or are enlightened in a way and maybe not scared of death. Now, they kept saying the Celts were the ones who were not scared of dying or not scared of death. So the Romans having those helmets on would have been important. And it is also kind of a little bit, some of them weren't completely like U-shaped, they were kind of straighter, and that kind of makes me think of that long barrow shape. So there's somewhat going on religiously. They didn't want to accept the religions, they wanted to wipe them out, but yet they got these symbols on their army. There's somewhat going on with that. And then, when the Romans pull out, through this Arthurian Saxon period, it's known as helmet. The area is known as helmet. But the Romans didn't call it helmet. They said that, not nameplace, sorry, the people, what the people called. The Romans said that these are the brigantes. But it was the Romans who had that shape on the helmet, which was essentially is a bridge shape themselves. So, like, the Romans kind of, are going over and saying those people are the brigantes, but the Romans have got a bridge on their own helmet, We know there definitely was a Celtic god called Brigid. So that's correct. But what they're trying to say is that they're saying it was female, but the Celts never wrote anything down. I don't think it was. We've got the Isle of Man. We've got a lot of sites on there. Why is it called Man, though? The Isle of Man, Manx. because, some of those sites on there are the female shape. Those island sites at Newgrange, Dowth and Knowth, they're all kind of like what are entered, more sort of like female shape. Although Ireland has got some elongation sites, but it's strange that this Brigid god is always said to be female. But the thing with Brigid is, it's meant to represent a mast or a pole or a pier, an elongation. You see, when you see a picture of St. Patrick or the earlier pictures of the Druids, they're meant to have these poles, these staffs. Now that's an elongation as well. Even the male phallic, the male genitals, an elongation. If you've got a Celtic god and their name is to represent an elongation or a mast or pole or beam, surely it's male, because that's what the male shape is, right? It also, if it means to project outwards, when you draw the saints and they've got the halos, there's that aspect to projection as well. I mean, when you can get into other subjects as well, talking about consciousness being projected out or visions on walls or chambers and stuff like that, if you want to get into the psychedelic experience. But mainly it was meant to be a pier or a pole or mast, So I think, this is my hunch, you see, even the snake is an elongation. When they say St. Patrick, he was born in Wales, but he was Christian and he went over to Ireland and he supposedly drove all the snakes. You see, snakes are elongations, aren't they? Loads of elongations as well. Drove the snakes out of Ireland. Well, if he was driving the snakes out of Ireland and the Celtic gods and pagan gods, Brigid being one of those, so if he was driving, what are the snakes, the pagan religion and snakes? Well, it's all their gods and beliefs. So if he's driving out the gods and beliefs out of Ireland, that means he's get rid of them. So how do you get rid of them? Is to either mix them up or lie about them or make them forget them. How would you do that? They had this Christian saint Brigid, and they had it as a woman. So if you suddenly come up with a Christian saint and it's a woman, Brigid, then it could easily quite oust the memory of what the pagan Brigid was, And I think on that Book of Kells, there's some strong evidence for, because it's a bridge. That character on that illumination, he's putting his arms out and making a bridge, He's doing a few things. But then again, you see, this is what makes me laugh. A professor wants to say to you, oh no, you're talking a lot of rubbish about that illumination of all these different things you're reading into it. But yet, he can say, I'm a professor, get me vocabulary, I'll give you some fancy words that mean loads of different things because I'm a professor and I've got a degree and I say what these mean. And, well, no, it tells you in the dictionary what it means. Look, right, if the shape fits, right, in the fucking box, it fits, right? This is the funny thing, right? With language, who's to say what means what? We know what it means because the book tells us what it means. Here is the word. Dissertation. Right. Who knows what it means? We don't need to ask the professor what it means. We don't need to go to a court and get the justice of the peace to hit his hammer on a table, right, to tell us what it means. It has been written. It is published. It tells you what it means in the book, right? It's published. It's official. Now, all you have to do is learn to interpret it. Once I have been told what it means, then when I can read. Now, with the symbols and shapes, right? This is when we get into professors and degrees. There is no vocabulary for the pictures, right? Because they are to be interpreted more freely, but there are fixed interpretations. It is what it is, right? Basically. Now, there are things in the imagery that are clearly obvious, right? And you can talk about it and say, well, that's that and that's that and that's that, right? And then, the professor, now, it's either one of two situations. Either he doesn't understand it, or he's lying when he's saying that, you're talking rubbish when he knows you're not. And that's the problem we're at now. That's the issue. Because it's knowledge, and we actually don't. The thing is, we've got a big gap of study missing, which is either off limits for, we're not allowed to study it because it's for the privileged only to study, which you could say that the Boris Johnson private school boys, only they are privileged enough to be educated. Like all these ancient sites in Guernsey and Jersey and Anglesey that no one knew about when you typed stuff in on the internet for chambers and mounds, and they never popped up. Had the internet people taken them all off because we weren't privileged enough to be given that information? That now they cannot suppress it because there are all those people who live in those local areas and can't not know about it, are going out and taking photographs in Facebook groups and banging it all on there. So you can not find out about it now. But back then, when the internet was younger, the information wasn't up there as much or as thorough, or when you were typing it in, it wasn't popping up because somebody didn't want you to find out about it. But yet it turns out that, people had books. There were many books published, but how did you know about these books? Who had these books? Well, only people who were in university courses or degrees, or had parents who were archaeologists, or parents who were philosophers, or your friend's dad was, not people who they only wanted to be aware of holidays to Bora Bora or duty free. Or the only information that's going to pop on your mobile phone when you type it in is going to be, what the duty free rate is on a pack of cigarettes from France, or where your next holiday to Mallorca is coming from, and what revenue you're going to be making Rees-Mogg. You were not to be privileged to have access to that information knowledge database. It was only for Boris and Richard Tice and a couple. Oxford were allowed to access it, and everyone else just was fed the mainstream junk food of information and knowledge about going to Lanzarote, because that's what they wanted them to do, because it was making them a hell of a lot of money. And now people are going to be wanting to go on holidays even more and buying soundproofing for the houses because of all the noise they're making with planes, cars and houses they're building here, and no one's going to like it here anymore. So it's going to be good business because they're going to be having to sell soundproofing for the walls, so to keep quiet. And then, you're going to want to get away from all this noise and mess they're making around your house. So you're going to go on holiday. Literally, if they create hell at home, then they're going to make a fortune out of you to defend your house from the hell, and then go on holiday to get away from it. What the perfect business model for Boris and Rees-Mogg is not make England great, but make England hell. If you make England hell, you're going to make a fortune. Because then people are going to have to fortify their houses from the hell they're creating because they can't stop. And then they're going to be wanting to get away from it all. So that's what Boris's plan is now. Make hell. Let us make hell. And let us make a fortune out of it. And, when we make our fortunes, we'll have paradise around us. Mark Zuckerberg will have his little paradise on Hawaii with his grounds and... he's. I thought we'd gone past that now. I thought all the big estates and lands, were meant to be sold off. But yet Zuckerberg's got this massive Hawaii estate. When actually isn't, I I thought it was, isn't, what do you call him? Isn't the guy who's got Tesla, I forgot his name now, isn't he supposed to live in like a really cheap house that is kind of like, it's sort of like a fold-up house which gets off the back of a lorry or something and really cheap. He hasn't got massive estates like Zuckerberg. So, I don't know if we got onto that from Anne Robb, actually, to be honest. This conversation was only meant to be at Anne Robb. Were you happy? I was happy before the Tories got greedy and their greed accelerated at an alarming rate, and they decided that there was no stopping them and their addictions had to continue full speed until our entire livelihoods and neighbourhoods were swallowed up in chaos, and they made a fortune out of us having to get away from it and defending our interests, because they're responsible for it, because they can't stop what they're doing. They've got no self-control over progress, Progress has no self-control. It's an addiction. And Rob, progress. Was there progress? There was progress. Were you happy? I was happy. Are you happy now? No. Because the Tories are taking over the entire world and completely ruining it with creating a regime of blocking, ignorant and lacking understanding administration centres, which is affecting the psychology of our entire neighbourhoods, where no one wants to speak to each other now. People aren't happy because then they won't come together and unite and vote in opposition against the parties. They're all divided, divide and conquer. Tories divide and conquer. And if the Tories can't get your vote, then by bloody hell, you're not going to get their votes. If the Tories can't get people to vote for them, then they're not going to let you go around and get them to vote for what you want. You're not using Facebook to get votes. You're not using YouTube to get votes. If them people on Facebook and YouTube aren't voting for Boris, then you're not bloody well as going to be using it. You're not going to be sending. You're not going to be sitting there with sending 10,000 messengers a day. Mark Zuckerberg ain't going to let you use his platform to get a referendum on whether Facebook should be banned from the internet or not. Oh look, all I need is 3 million signatures, and I can trigger a referendum on whether or not we should get Facebook. How about this? How about a new law where Facebook is not allowed to actually ban anyone from groups? Let's have a referendum on a new piece of legislation where Facebook cannot have group bans. You can still ban individuals if you want. You can block people if you don't want to talk to them, but you can't remove them from a group because it says your group. No, I didn't form the group, but it's telling me it's my group. Look, your group, right? And why do you? If one person in the group doesn't like me, should I be removed from it? Who owns a group? No one owns a group. Facebook doesn't. Facebook owns a group. The person who started the group doesn't own it. All they did is put a flag on the floor. It says everyone who is interested in this come to the flag, right? Now, if you're at that group, basically the owner of the group wants to control who's in the group and control their influence over the group. That's the problem. But it's not his group. He doesn't own those. Does he then own those people in that context of that interest? He owns their asses. How about I'm going to sit there and I'm going to send 3 million messenger messages, right? I've got the right to do that without any commitments being held against me, which includes Facebook policy. And I'm going to ask everyone to sign a petition to say that the government must make it so people can't be removed from groups. Let's do that. You know, but Mark says, no, not on my platform. Well, no, yeah, not on your platform once we've all voted for it. You know, but I'll like to see Zuckerberg put his money on the table. You know, will everyone vote to carry on with blocks from groups? I think that there's less administrators and more members, right? So it's like factory bosses and workers. You know, ooh, Labour and Tory. Why are Tory winning when there's fewer bosses and more workers? Why don't Labour win when there's more workers and less bosses? We don't know. You know, ooh, there are a hell of a lot of people annoyed with admins and mods on Facebook recently when they've been removed from no reason. There's a lot of people complaining about administrators and moderators. Does that mean that if we had a vote on it, then, you know, the admins and mods are going to lose because there's like, you know, 50 to 100 to 1 in the 100 to 1 odds? So who's going to win, the members or the admins? That'd be a funny vote. I'd like to see Zuckerberg get his balls, testicles out and put them on the table. Like if you know, if Mark and Nick Clegg want to get the testicles out and put them on the table and say, right, let's have it, a referendum. You know, should we get rid of, you know, people being removed from Facebook groups? Like if a certain person don't like talking to them, you know, if 10 people in a group don't like him, or if 20 people in a group don't like him, or if 30 people in a group don't like him, you can block them, right? Can we do that? Or should, you know, or should they be allowed to be in there? Or could the whole group decide and vote on it? Should the whole group vote on it before anyone's removed? If someone in a group is being annoying for saying one thing, shouldn't, you know, the entire group vote on whether they should stay in the group or not? You know, and then that would really be a fair, let the jury decide, not just, you know, one admin. Oh, this is my group. I own these people. I'm not a dog, you know. I'm not a dog. I don't have an owner. You know, this is my group. No, it's not. You don't own it. I formed it. Well, yeah, you brought people together who like a certain subject, but you don't own us. You know, if someone's misbehaving in the group, maybe people should vote on it. You know, that's it. But I don't think Zuckerberg's truly liberal. He's really a Tory in disguise, and I don't know why Nick Clegg claims that he's a liberal, because Nick Clegg's not a liberal. There's no such thing as liberal anymore. It doesn't exist. And robh, liberal. Were there liberals? They were liberals. The robbing of the liberals. There were liberals, and now there aren't any. So yeah, that's my conversation on robh. Anyway, yeah, I think there's quite a lot to do with Robin Hood. In that, I'll tell you what I'll do now. I'll just put we'll find out about the word hood. Cockle. Wouldn't that be like the happy word? Hood. Cockles and mussels. That's all I can think of. Cockles and mussels. Huddersfield. Oh, look. Arthur. Looks like Arthur, doesn't it? But not with a U. Arthur. Is that right? There's actually... Heather is actually a word. Not Heather. It was spelled Huddersfield. Arthur. Huddersfield. Could it have been Arthur'sfield? I don't know about that. Oh. Heather is Arthur, is father. Fathersfield. Further afield. Really? Huddersfield. Huddersfield was Huddersfield. There's other. His father. Well, if it was father, then that's kind of like the male. That's like what I was talking about with the male phallic thing, you know, father. It's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Father, further. Father. Those long barrows are spaced out further than the woods at Newgrange as well. And it's a lot further along the Humber than it is along the Bruna Boyne to the coast. That's some things that are farther, further, farther. And further, like an elongation is further than, you know, a rectangle is further than a square. A square's square, but a rectangle's further, isn't it? Farther afield. That's a saying, that. Yes, unless we go further afield, farther afield. Arthur. Is this... What about Heather? Is that how you spell it? Heath. No, Heather is frog. What is it? Heather's. Arthur. Father. That's interesting, isn't it? Let's just see if Heather is an actual word. That's stupid, will it? You got to pay for or sign up. Going to Cambridge when poor people have to go in the Cambridge dictionary and it is a bridge. Camberdenham, Cambridge, Brigantes, Bridget. When did Oxford University have an argument and split up anyway? Was that around 800 or after? I think that university was formed... Was it formed after the Normans or just before in the Anglo-Saxon? I can't remember. Might have been 1100 or something. Is Heather a word? Heather, father, gather. Oh, gather. Huddersfield, Gathersfield. Ah, right. We've got gather. Huddersfield. Huddersfield. It was written Huddersfield unless one of them lied. Robin of the Hood. Gathering of the Hood. Gather of the Hood. Hathered. Hath. In the past. All right, look. This is interesting now. Look at this, right? In the past. Hath means...
Hath.
Wow, this is now astounding. Hath. What was I talking about earlier? And yes, I have been talking for 1 hour and 8 fucking minutes. I just swore for the first time.
Hath.
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 Look at this. In the past. The third person singular form of the present of have. In the past. Third person singular form of the tense have. So that's like when I was saying in unrob. Unrob is in the past tense, isn't it? To have something. Or was there something? Was it there or not? Did they have it? Right? Well, that's unrob. Robbing of the hood. Well, that's what hood means. Unrob, robbed means question mark over the past tense. Well, that's what hath means as well. Hath means In the past, the third person singular form of a sense to have. Huddersfield was Hathersfield. And Rob, so not only Robin of the Hood and Rob, Bob, and no, not Rob, but and Hood. And Rob, past tense, question mark, have, past tense. To have. Both of them. Snap. Snap.
Hath. Hath.
Hathersfield.
Hath. Hath. Hath.
And it's definitely an A. It says Hathersfield, not Heathersfield. It doesn't say Heathersfield. It says Hathersfield in the past tense, in the third person singular, the present to have. To have a field. When they had one. Maybe it was like they had that field at the top of that warrior's tomb, and then they didn't have it anymore. Someone had it. Maybe the Celts had it, and then they didn't. Maybe the entire Druid order. Maybe the Book of Kells in 800. Maybe those priests and the Druids had the bridge houses. Maybe they had that site. Maybe they had the Huddersfield area, like on the drawing of the Book of Kells with the long barrow. And he's kind of pointing over it far away. Maybe he had something. It's interesting that the word father is father, and then hath is like H-A-T-H, but father's F-A-T-H-E-R. And your father, to have something is your father has a son. You get into this Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, don't you? Like, but the funny thing is, the Son shines out and projects out, doesn't it? It beams out. That's like when he began his, like the sun, the light bridges the gap. What was the other one? Gather. What's like father? F-A-T-H-A-R is to gather, to collect, and gather.
Gather.
It's very similar to father, isn't it? Gather. Hathersfield. Gathersfield. Hathersfield. Gathersfield. Fathersfield. Well, if you're a father, it's male, isn't it? I was saying that isn't Huddersfield like the male symbol, and then like the Newgrange sites are like the female symbol, and then even on one of them you've got all the little children around one of them, and you go inside them, kind of like the, that's what I was saying.
Gather. Gather.
There's something I'm not just making this up. There's some of this Robin Hood.
Heather.
A low spreading bush, usually with small pink, purple or white flowers that grows wild, especially on hills. There might be some poetry in this, And there was something there. To gather something. There was something there in the past tense, both Robin and Hood. To gather something. To father something. Huddersfield. Prune, Boyne, Noaf, Doaf. See, Noaf is like knowledge, isn't it? To know. Gather. I think Darth. Father's Darth, isn't it? Because that's where we got the term Darth Vader from. If we go into the dictionary, if you put father in, it says Darth. Oh no, it's not. It's Arthur. What's Darth then? Arthur. Arthur. It's like Arthur, isn't it? Father. Your father's Arthur. Arthur. Affair. Arthur. To have an affair. And to have a father. To have an affair. See, Joseph Campbell always goes on about R2. R2 meaning the bear. The bear was Arthur or R2. But here its father is Arthur. Huddersfield. What's gather? Whoa, no, that's Quina each hadach. Gather. Ruin each. CRUin. It's Cruinichad. Look, ruin each. Hey, you've got each one that you pick. You've got to ruin it. Ruin each one. Oh, had. Look, it's almost as if the words ruin each and had. But had is in the past tense, isn't it? There was something there. You picked it, each one of them. Gathering something, right? When you're gathering lots of things like flowers, right? Each one you pick it, once you've picked it and plucked it from the floor, in a way you've ruined each one, and it was there in the past tense. It's interesting that it's kind of formed like that. Cruinichad. Oh, collection. A collection of something. Well, that the thing with that is this, right? So at Brig, the Brig house Brig is meant to be a pile of, or a stack of, or a stash. Well, is that not a collection? At Brig, at the bridge, or at the stack, or at the pile, at the elongations, at the mast. I think you could, if you want to get really basic, you could just say like, father male and mother female, but that's kind of adult, not young children. I don't know. I think I'm going to stop now because it's getting late now, and I've been going for an hour and 17. So there's quite a few things to throw out there for it. I think not throw out, throw in. There's quite a few things to put on the table, should I say?